In this lesson, you're going to learn how to build a realistic and immersive world around your characters using sound, specifically Foley effects and backgrounds. Let's start with Foley. Foley is the reproduction of sounds usually designed to accompany the noise-making movements of actors in a film. While there are countless specific Foley sounds that you might come across, they all fall into one of these three categories. The first category is props. This can include anything a character might interact with or manipulate on the screen. It could be the creaking of a chair as they sit down, the noise of a coffee mug as they place it on a wooden table, or maybe the subtle sound of eyeglasses being taken off their face. The next category of Foley is footsteps. It's important to remember that there are many types of footsteps, and their sound quality is affected by the surface being walked on, the type of shoe, and the speed at which the person is moving. A woman in high heels running on asphalt is going to sound a lot different than a man in sneakers walking on dirt. Or maybe gravel. And the last category of Foley is cloth, specifically the sound of cloth sliding and rustling as a person moves around. The other critical component to creating a realistic world for your characters to inhabit is background sound, commonly referred to as backgrounds. Backgrounds are sound beds that run the entire length of a scene because they are inherently present in the location on the screen. Common types of backgrounds include sounds like room tone, wind, street traffic, and birds. The process of adding Foley and background sound to your cut is incredibly important, as more often than not, the field audio recorded during production isn't going to be enough to sell the realism of the scene. During this lesson, we're going to be cutting scene 21. In this scene, Alex has arrived back in his hometown to attend the funeral, and he's just left the airport car rental counter to pick up his ride in the parking lot. It turns out that Claire, the rental agent, assigned him a tiny pink Ford Fiesta, which he isn't too psyched about, so he decides to break into a Mustang and take that car instead. Again, Alex making poor choices. The scene needs a lot of help with regard to Foley and background sound to sell the realism of the action, so it's going to be a perfect learning environment to dig into the techniques that we've been discussing. Now, I'm going to hand things over to Brian so he can walk you through the exact process that you can use to add this type of sonic realism to your scene. All right, here we go.
This demo is going to be all about doing Foley audio. Now, in some cases with a film that you receive, you don't have to worry too much about doing the Foley audio, because sometimes you get a really great situation where the production audio captures quite a lot of really good sound live while on set. But there are some occasions where, for whatever reason, the sound that was recorded is either not fantastic or wasn't recorded at all. Take, for example, this scene right here. So I've already gone ahead and made some markers in my selects sequence to indicate the starts of each shot. And in this scene, Alex is going to steal this car. Now, not this car. He doesn't like this car. He's going to steal this car, right? But the problem is that they didn't seem to record any actual audio while they were filming this scene. So we've got all these incredible sounds of Alex, trying to jimmy the lock, and his shirt is moving and his footsteps are walking forwards and backwards, and we can kind of build an entire sound bed of the environment of this empty, dark, late night parking lot. But with none of that, we're going to have to go in and do that Foley work ourselves, and that's what this is going to be all about. So the first thing that I'm going to do before I get started even beginning to cut together this sequence is I'm going to make a temp edit sequence. But the thing about it is that normally with our temp edit sequences, we only have 2 or 3 or 4 tracks of audio. That's because primarily when we do a lot of the editing of these scenes, we don't have much more than just some dialogue tracks to worry about. In this case, we have a lot of sound effects that we're going to build, and this may get really, really complex. So I'm going to grab my master timeline sequence from my template new sequences bin and just drag a copy of that into my bin for this particular scene. I'll just name this 04 scene 21 Foley sequence. And we'll just start with this now. So now this is blank, but the advantage here is that we've given ourselves a lot more sound effects tracks to work with, and we may even add some more depending on how complex our sound design gets. So let's go ahead and hop into editing this scene together so we can see what the situation is with our Foley. So first I'm going to load my selects into my source here, and I've got all these markers indicating the starts of the shots. There was no reason to really make a line breakdown, so to speak, here, because all that really happens here is Alex looks at the keys, we tilt up, Alex looks up from the keys, we pan over, and then there's a close-up of Alex breaking into the car. So there would have been no point in going ahead and making a line breakdown, as there's really no dialogue to speak of in this scene. So let's find the best take of the keys and then tilting up to the car. So we have a variety of different takes here. Let's just go to the last one first and watch it. And that looks pretty good to me. So let's cut that one into our sequence. All right, very good. Now we're going to go and see from this shot here, we're going to cut to a shot of Alex. So he's going to be looking down at those keys. He's going to look up. So we have 2 takes of that. The first one. I'm noticing there's like a shadow on him here. I'm going to try to avoid this take. I think this might be a mistake while they were filming. Let's try the second take here. That's a lot stronger. So we're going to cut in right from the marker here. That's great. So we'll let Alex walk towards the car here, and we'll just cut this into our sequence. And then let's look at the shots of him breaking into the car. I'm going to start with the last take as well. Okay, great. That was a pretty good take, and I can say from experience, if you've ever jimmied the lock of a car, that's pretty realistic. I'm kidding, it was my car, I had to get into it. And finally, we have this B-roll shot of Alex driving away, which we'll worry about a little bit later. Let's go ahead and make this scene actually work in terms of the timing of everything first. So we begin the scene by looking at the keys in Alex's hand. And we tilt up, and we see this pink car. We cut to Alex. Now he's looking down at the keys. He's going to look up from the keys and see the pink car. And when he sees it, he kind of has this reaction of like, I don't want to drive this pink car. So he looks over, our camera pans over and reveals the nice car that we're going to work with. And he's going to walk towards that. And then we cut away to the shot of Foley of him breaking into the car. So we just have to trim some of this up and make this work a little bit better. Let's start from the back of our timeline here and start getting these shots to play together nicely. So for one, he walks towards the car, but because he never actually walks into and settles into this shot, we don't have to begin it with him jamming the lockpick into the car. We can begin with it already in there, kind of avoid some of the messing around here. And we'll just make an in and an out point and remove this. And there you go, the lock is lifted, he opens the door, gets into the car here, throws his bag in, and then he'll sit down and close the door. Boom. And so this is great. So as the door closes, I'm going to cut away right there. So now we could say, let's go to this B-roll shot of the car driving. Let's just look at the last one here and see how that looks. I kind of like that the car is moving further away from us from the camera. So let's begin with the car moving further away from the camera here. And we'll just get out right there. This is just for reference. This is probably going to connect to the next scene. So this might just be here as a reference for now that we work on later on. Now let's check out where we're at with the beginning of this scene. So we begin with a shot of keys in a hand, and then a tilt up. But there's also this great moment where Alex is looking down at the keys, then looks up, and I really like his move here. So how do we incorporate both of those things? Well, we could try to begin with him looking down at the keys, kind of make an edit right there, and then put him looking down at the keys in front of the shot of the keys themselves. So he's looking down, Then we see keys, and we can actually extend the beginning of him looking down here. So now we see him looking down at the beginning of the scene. And then we see him looking at the keys. And then we don't do the tilt up yet. Then we're going to make an edit. And we'll grab the tilt up with his eyes. He's looking up, and as his head is turning upwards, then we'll cut into the middle of the tilt up here. Something kind of like this. So we'll remove this part right here. Take this one from the back here, drop it in, put this next to it. Let's play that out. And it's kind of a nicer edit there. Now we can go back to Alex's reaction of like, I don't want to drive this car. And maybe we can use less of it. It was pretty long when we first started cutting it into our sequence. So how about we begin right here? So it's kind of like right into that head turn. So let's remove that. And let's bring all this back together now. So some little continuity things I want to clean up while we're already in the middle of this section. So the first is I like the beginning here, but I feel like this first shot of the keys right here is just a little bit too short. So let's get some more keys in there. And then maybe just a little bit more of Alex before he looks up. And then in the middle of him looking up here, I'm going to cut away from this. And then add just a little more of that actual camera work. So we're seeing just a little bit of that hand. And that's pretty good. Now I'm just going to see if I can get a little bit more out of this shot from the beginning of it. And I'm going to turn on this thing in my Avid to see if I have duplicated any frames from another shot in the sequence to make sure I'm not duplicating something that I already have in my timeline. So let me check out here, dupe detection, video. You can also do this in Premiere by clicking on the wrench icon in your timeline and choosing show duplicate frames, or in Resolve by going up to the view menu and choosing show duplicate frames. Now right here, this little green line, this says that I'm already using these frames. So what I could try to do is go back into my selects here and find a different take of Alex looking down. So right here. Before he looks up. So now, if I were to go ahead and cut that in, I can remove this one entirely. The dupe detection is gone, meaning that I don't see any duplicated frames from any of the shots in my sequence. I can go ahead and close up this gap right here. And let's play this back. So it's pretty great, but there is, of course, a problem. There's no sound. Now sure, I could just say, you know what, I'll cover it with some music, it'll be fine. But really, we want to build out that sound bed to make the scene come to life the best way possible. And we'll be doing that in part 2 of this lesson.
Hey guys, Chris here. So this lesson is going to have some homework. First, mark the start of each shot in the takes, since they were recorded as a series rather than fully separated takes. Then cut together the picture only. As Alex walks across the parking lot, jimmies the lock, and steals the car. Coming up in the next lesson, we're going to get into what this lesson is really all about, layering the sound. Brian is going to pick right up at the beginning of the next lesson. So again, make sure that you have your picture edit all ready to go. All right, we'll see you in a bit.
So I have a bin full of sound effects here, and we're going to use our search terms to find the sound effects that we need. I have just a huge bin full of sound effects, and depending on what you have on your end, you may have sorted these either with some comments to break them out into more specific groups, or maybe you're using different bins for different types of sound effects. Whatever method works for you, ultimately the idea is to observe the sound effect in your source and then cut it into your timeline. But there's really no wrong way of doing this. If you want to work in your software and drop all of the sound effects into the back of the timeline and pick and choose the ones you like the best and raise and lower them, and whatever works the best for you is going to work okay. It's very similar to cutting dialogue or making a line breakdown. So however you choose to organize those sound effects and organize your thoughts as you work through them is going to be an okay way of working. Now, for me personally, I'm just going to type in some search terms or use a filtering tool to bring up some search terms. That might make it easier to just kind of click through the ones that I want. I'm going to cut them into my sequence. Let's just begin first with some ambient sound. I want to fill the sound of this parking lot first. So I'm going to begin by just typing ambience and see what we have. So this wet highway sound is a little too intense. We're not near a rainy, wet highway. Traffic. Definitely too close and too loud. And how about some city ambience? A little too intense. Maybe ambience isn't the right term. Let's try AMB for ambient. Now we have a couple of extra ones here. You know, I kind of like the crickets. Now, they are obviously really loud, but let's go ahead and bring them in, and let's significantly lower their volume. Let's go negative 48. Now, already the scene is starting to feel a lot better. I have this sort of sound bed underneath everything that's kind of working. I'm also going to start to layer in some other ambient sounds, like perhaps some dog barking, distant dog barking. Let's see if we can find where those sound effects happen. Yeah, I like this one right here. Let's grab this one. Nice. Now let's go ahead and cut that into our sequence. Drop it right here for now. All right, now let's figure out where we want to hear some dog barking sounds. So we want to establish this as a maybe not the best neighborhood and maybe not the worst neighborhood. We just want to establish this as maybe a place where you'd hear some dogs barking, maybe from a nearby fence that we can't actually see in the shot, something that would give a sense of the space that he's in. So somewhere sooner in the scene would be better. Let me bring this over here. Maybe we'll start it right over here on the shot of the keys. Or actually, perhaps as we tilt up. Like right here would be good. And I like that. Let's go negative, 18 on the sound, something to make it a little bit quieter. Now that last bark is unnecessary. But I'm going to reintroduce those barking dogs in a second. I want to do that when he's breaking into the car to give a sense of like maybe there's, like a security dog nearby, just to give a sense of urgency to the moment. Yeah, I like these kind of strangely timed barks. Let's cut that in. We'll do let's go -14 this time. So even though it'll be a really subtle difference, it'll feel like as we are closer to the car, the barking noise can be just a tiny bit closer to us to give that sense of maybe a little bit of danger or a little bit of urgency. Okay, that's great. Now we're going to get rid of these crickets as we get to the driving scene, because once we get into the driving, it'll be a totally different sound. Now we got to start building out some of the more specific Foley in the scene. So there are, of course, 3 Foley categories: props, footsteps, and cloth. Let's begin with the ones that are the most obvious, and that'll be the footsteps. Let's just type in foot here and see what we get. Okay, so we got some different footsteps. I got wet concrete. Let's listen to these. A little bit too tough to work with, I think. So these are not bad, actually. And if we make them nice and quiet, it'll work perfectly. So we don't have any footsteps to worry about here. He's not really shifting his feet. He's not walking forward. We don't want to add any footsteps as the camera tilts up because he's not actually moving. So he doesn't begin to move until we see him enter frame. So that's right here. Now we're going to wait till we can actually see those feet. And just to make this easier on us, I'm going to go ahead and turn off this mask right here. Now we can see his feet a little bit sooner. Let's go back to right before we see him enter frame. So we have a footstep right here. Okay, so let's try to line up this footstep. Now you could do a couple different things. If you want to use markers, you can use those to indicate the footsteps, or you can just go ahead and drop your footsteps into your timeline and see how it goes. I'm going to do just that. Let me go ahead and grab some footsteps here. Starting here, and I'll just grab like a handful of these, and I'll cut them in right here. Okay, great. So the footsteps are right down here. Let me go ahead and raise the size of my waveforms here so we can see them a little bit better. Okay, now we have footstep, and he's walking pretty quick, so we may have to add another track of stereo so I can overlap these footsteps left, right, left, right, left, right. But before I do that, I need to make a disclaimer. We're demoing this tutorial in Avid, and if you are familiar with Avid, you know that what I'm about to do is not a great habit to get into because it can cause some confusion later on, specifically because our master timeline template for building the entire movie will not have the same tracks or track numbers as what I'm doing in this timeline. In Avid, you can easily solve this by being careful about how you patch your tracks when you eventually do cut this work into the master timeline. And if you are using Premiere or Resolve, this probably sounds a little foreign to you, as it's very easy to simply add a track anywhere into your timeline without messing up the overall order of your tracks. Now we're going to go into detail about this process specifically a little later in the course. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'll bring that stereo track right down here and just rename it. So now we have another stereo track to work with. Let's go ahead and cut up these footsteps. I'm going to make a cut for each footstep that we have. So just like that. And I'll checkerboard them, just like this. Okay, great. Let me make these a little bit larger as well so we can see them a little bit better. All right. So now we're going to have footstep 1. So that's going to be right here. So we're going to move this footstep over so that footstep lands right when his foot lands. And we're going to go through each footstep individually and line them up. So 1, 2. So we have to move this one over. Just like this. Now they're going to get a little bit better. Maybe a little bit too behind. So a little bit forward here. Just like that. Now he lands another foot with the left right there. So we have to move this footstep over. Okay, great. Now we only gave him 3 footsteps at the end of this shot, but we're going to give him just 1 more footstep and remove this one. And we're going to fade that footstep out. Kind of like this. We're going to kind of blend those footsteps into the next shot. Now, here's the thing. We can't just have it be silent, and then all of a sudden, that doesn't make any sense, because he's still walking this entire time. So now we know the general cadence of the footsteps, and we can kind of measure what we think his footsteps are supposed to be going backwards. So what I like to do is I like to make markers and just count the time between markers. I'm going to drop the markers on this track right here. So this is a marker. Number 1 for the first footstep, 2 for the next footstep, 3, and then I kind of have a fourth one right here. So I'm going to see how many frames. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 frames, and then 13 frames, 14 frames. So it's roughly 12 frames for every footstep. So if we just kind of do something between 10 and 14 frames for every other footstep, we're going to get a fairly similar cadence to what his actual walking speed is. So I'm going to go ahead and take this footstep right here and drag a copy of it over here. I'm going to expand it out to the left here and close up this right here. Now, just to help us out a little bit, to make sure we're not repeating any actual sounds, I'm going to come back down to my preferences here and turn on the duplicate detection for the audio as well. So just to see how that works, if I were to expand this here, we can see that there's this little red line right up here, which shows that this part of the audio and this part of the audio are duplicated. So just to make sure I'm not using a duplicate footstep, I'm going to remove that. It'll just give us a little indicator so we don't accidentally double something up. Let's bring in some of our footsteps here. And just to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to start counting with some markers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's go 12. I'm going to use a different color this time as well. This way I'll know which ones are visible and which ones are not. Let's go 10 frames. That was 13 frames. That was 14 frames. 10. So we're just kind of giving a rough sense of what we think his timing actually would be. And give him just a little bit more timing at the back here, even though we don't see him at all, because he might start slower and speed up. So here's where our footsteps should attempt to fall. And we're just going to go ahead and visually line things up now by checkerboarding our footsteps. Okay, great. Now let's take a listen to how this sounds, just as is. Okay, so it's not too bad, but there's quite a lot of unnecessary noise, and we have to blend these together better. So we're going to use some crossfades to make that work. So we'll just do a little crossfade here, crossfade out of this. We'll separate these so we can make the crossfades a little bit better. And we'll crossfade this one, out of this one, into this one, we'll do out of this one, into this one, out, in. And then for this, we're going to go ahead and crossfade quietly into this one. We'll do the same thing. We'll kind of come out of this one, into this one, out, in, out, in, out, in, and out. Okay, great. Now, the other thing is that they were far too loud. For footsteps, they wouldn't be that loud. Let's go ahead and lower their volume, all of them. Let's go -12 on those footsteps. And let's take a listen to where we're at now. So it's not too great, and part of it is because we're hearing the heel of the foot and the front of the foot. So if we just go ahead and really trim those footsteps down, it should make them a little bit better. So we're going to come in here and just really trim these down a lot. We're just trying to get really precise with the actual footstep that's being made. So we just want the step part. So now let's take a listen to that. And it's definitely a little bit better. Now there's other noises that we're going to go ahead and blend into that as well, so it won't sound so empty. Like some clothing rustle is going to help all of that movement. So we have lots of clothing movement we have to worry about. His arms on his jacket, his pants as they swish together. Let's find some of that cloth movement and start to layer in some cloth. Now I'm going to go ahead and add in probably more stereo tracks. Let's just grab a couple more of these. And I'll just rename them really quickly. All right, so now we're going to bring in some of this cloth sound. So let's try clothing rustles. Now some of these are a little too intense, so it's just a matter of finding quite the right sound. So the grabs are going to be too intense. What about flap? Now these are going to be a lot better. So number 7 was pretty good. And the idea is to lower these volumes quite a lot. Let's go -20 here. Yeah, so lots of little cloth sounds as he's walking are really going to help things out. So if I were to bring in another one of these, let's just bring this one in here. Let it run the whole way. Go -24. Now right there, it's kind of working. We're not hearing that strange blending of footsteps because we're hearing some cloth rustle. Now I could take this cloth rustle and duplicate it. Maybe bring the beginning of it right in here and just trim out some of the duplicate parts. Now we're getting that duplicate warning because we're using this twice, and that's okay. We're going to do this a couple different times actually, like this, but we're going to change the volumes. Let's go -32, let's go -20. So some different volume stuff with maybe a crossfade in on this one and out, and then this one here will kind of crossfade out of, just kind of making something different out of one single track of audio. Now they're all actually quite too loud. Let's go another 10 down on each one. And that's a lot better. Now there's other sounds that we can kind of blend into this moment besides the cloth, the crickets, the walking. We want to bring in some sort of other ambience to kind of fill out all that sort of dead feeling space. So let's see what we have in our sound effects bin that might strike a good tone. So this room tone, electric, this could be really good. This could be these lights up here. Maybe we'll type in something like electric. Okay, electrical hum. That's a little bit too intense. Something like this seems like it would be a natural sound to hear in a parking lot like this with these types of lights over the top of the cars. Let me go ahead and bring this into our timeline here. So we'll just make an in point and an out point where the actual electrical hum actually happens. And we'll bring it in right down here. And we're going to have to duplicate it. So we're going to have to make a copy of it, duplicate it. We're going to let these things kind of blend together. So we'll make a crossfade on them. We'll duplicate a second one of these. So they're going to need to crossfade. Now we're going to lower the volume. Let's go -20. Now I think the crickets could actually be louder now that we're adding in this other sound. Let's go -34. Maybe some light wind would even blend into this nicely as well. Now this wind is not too bad here. We can try this one out. At a very low volume, that might work really well for us. So we're going to probably need another audio track. And bring this into my audio track. Let's just extend this out here. And lower the volume. Let's go -24. Maybe that's too low. Let's go -12. It's pretty good. A little bit too loud on that wind. Let's go -16. And I think that all of these foot sound effects can come backwards like 1, maybe 2 frames. Now, if your program supports the ability to change the entire color of a track of audio or video, go ahead and do it. This is a good opportunity to color all of the items on a single track with one color. For example, I could say this is a little bit of a darker orange. These will be our footsteps. It's not the prettiest color, but at least I can differentiate between footsteps, ambience, and cloth. Now this stuff is all cloth right here. Let's make these all a darker color as well. Okay, so now it's a little bit easier to see our timeline, what's actually going on. You could also just rename the tracks if you want, but it's really important to try to keep these things somewhat organized and grouped together in a way that's easy to work through, because you're going to be adding a lot of layers as you do sound work. Now let me go ahead and just trim up the end of these two pieces of ambience and get rid of these end pieces. This is going to be a whole different section for sound here. Okay, so now we have to work on this actual part where he breaks into the car. So we have a lot of different sounds to be concerned about. The first is the actual metal jimmying of the lock. Then it's the car lock disengaging. Then it's the opening and closing of a car door, the clothing movement as he starts to enter the car, the throwing of the bag onto the seat, sitting down, the car kind of rocking up and down, and then slamming the door shut. So lots of sounds to do. But the great thing about something like this is that there's a lot of really clear sounds for us to try to follow. Unlike those footsteps where we had to kind of guess a little bit, here we have some very clear visual cues as to what's going on. For example, I'm going to start with something that I know, the door opening and closing. So car door opening. Let's try this out. So let's try car door open here. Yeah, that's pretty good. Now we have a couple other ones. I like that kind of noisy sound. I love that. These are great. Yep. Then let's try to combine some of these. So this one needs to have a more strong opening. But I like the squeak. Let's bring in the squeaking sound first. Cut it into one of our tracks here. Let's cut it into this track right here. And it has to happen a little bit more quickly. Now, depending on the software that you're using, you may have an effect that allows you to speed up the audio, and it's actually totally fine to go ahead and do this. I'm going to do that for this particular clip right here. Now in Avid, you're going to use time compression expansion. Open up the effects controls, and we're going to change the ratio here, and we're going to pay attention to the length. Now at the moment, the length is 6.798, but if I were to decrease the ratio, the length will become shorter. Let's try it down to like 5.0. And we'll go ahead and render that out. And click OK. That's pretty close. It's pretty accurate. Maybe I can make it just a little bit faster. Let's go 4.5. Render that out. Click OK. Now, like I said, this doesn't have a very strong door opening sound. Let's go ahead and cut in a stronger door opening sound from one of our other door opens, like this one. Yep, right there. Okay, great. Let's cut that in. Okay, so now we have to find right where the door handle gets yanked. So the handle is right here. You can see his hand kind of in the lower right corner. Let's start that right here. Yeah, it's really nice. So we're kind of blending two totally different car door sounds together. Now the door's going to close. So we have to get that sound. You almost kind of hear it as you're watching the video, like you're expecting that sound to happen. Now it's a little bit too sharp. Now I like this one here, actually. Yep, right there. Very good. All right. Now, I want to try something kind of neat and different. Now, on this track right down here, it's called Stereo-FX. That's because in my timeline, I've put a reverb effect on this entire stereo track. So any piece of audio that I drop into this track here is going to have a reverb on it. It's going to reverb out into the next scene. So let me go ahead and cut in that sound effect to this track. I'm going to move it over to where I think it's supposed to line up, like right about here. And let's play that back. It's a little too intense. It sounds like a scene from Law & Order. So maybe that wasn't a great idea. But if we tried to tweak the effect on this entire track, it would work really well. Now, of course, there are many different schools of thought for putting effects on tracks or not. And in our case, because I think that this reverb effect may be great for something else in the future, I'm going to leave this track alone, bring this back up here, and we're going to just go ahead and do that reverb manually in this track with a mixdown. So in Avid, I'm going to make myself a mixdown with some blank space after the audio is done. Now I've got my mixdown here, and this is where I can apply my reverb effect if I want to try to have this car door ring out into the next scene, which I think would be really cool. So let's just go ahead and lower the volume of this thing. We'll try -18. Cool. And I want to let this kind of reverb out. I'm going to let those crickets kind of fade out a little bit. And we're going to put a reverb on this audio right here. So in Avid, we're going to use the deverb effect. And we get this interesting screen. Now this is going to work really similar to any reverb effect in any other software. So the terms are really similar: decay, pre-delay, diffusion, LP filter, dry or wet on the mix. So for us, I'm going to do a large hall. I'm going to have a longer decay. I'm going to mess with these settings just a little bit and just see what we can come up with. If you're curious, dry and wet. So more wet means more of the reverb. Dry means more of the original sound. So I want to keep some of the original sound mixed in with some of the reverb. I'm going to say less diffusion. We're just going to preview this. It's pretty good. I'm going to raise the gain back up to 0. Let's go ahead and change the decay to be something a little bit lower, not quite as much of a reverb, and change the HF cut a little bit higher. Maybe a little more of the dry sound. And let's say less diffusion. It's pretty good. And let's say a little bit of the LP filter. Now that's sounding a lot better. We're getting some of that door crash sound now. Let's go ahead and render this out. Click OK. And we're going to also make sure to bring in some of the original sound as well. And we're going to lower its volume too. Let's go -20. So that's pretty cool. So let me go ahead and watch this whole little moment here. And it's already starting to come together. Now we obviously have some gaps to fill in the back here because there's a lot of dead space. We're expecting to hear some of these sounds because we're hearing so many of the other sounds. I do think that there's some mixing to be done as well. For example, these dogs can be -10. And we have to start bringing in some of these other sounds that are really important, like the really strong ones, the bag being dropped on the car seat, for example. So it lands right here. Let's see what we have in terms of hits. We have a body hit, wood hit, various metal hits. Let's just try out some body hits and see what they sound like. So that's going to kind of work. I know it sounds like someone's being punched in the face, but we're going to blend it together with some cloth sounds. Lower its volume, -20. Right, and then just add some cloth sounds to go with it. Let's just do a cloth grab and see how that sounds. So this is going to kind of work. We just kind of bring these two things in together, lower their volume quite a lot, kind of blend them together, and maybe make this a little bit louder. I mean, you're kind of getting the idea. He threw that bag into the car seat. And you don't really notice that those are not exactly the most perfect bag sounds because your eyes are doing a lot of the talking here. And the sound is there kind of supporting what's happening on screen. So the goal is to make something that makes sense to people. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you're more than likely going to send this out to a sound mixer if you're not doing the final sound mix yourself. And they're going to have an incredible library of all the most perfect sounds for your moment. They may even do a real Foley pass where they actually generate real sounds with real objects. But for the rough pass, this kind of stuff is perfectly acceptable. The idea is that just when someone is watching your scene, they don't go, hey, there's no sound here. So let's go ahead and keep moving forward on this scene. So we need to get him to jimmy the lock here with the metal rod. I think it'd be great to kind of bring in some of this metal sound ahead of the previous shot. Since we're letting some of the sound effects of the feet fade out, we should bring in some of the metal sounds a little bit earlier too, maybe like right here. Let's find some of those metal noises. Metal scrape, how's that sound? Oh, not that sound. That was pretty bad. I did finally find some really good metal sounds that I think are going to work really well for us. So back here, there's some interesting metal noise that if we blend it in with the other sounds of the scene, might actually work. Great, let's try this one. And I'm going to cut it into our timeline here. I'm going to use this track down here with the orange. So some noises are kind of working, some are not. Obviously this is a little bit too quiet because it's much closer to the screen. Let's go -12. So that one right there actually works really well. I'm going to just cut this clip right here and get rid of these extra ones that we don't need. And we're going to want to go ahead and put a crossfade. And a little bit too loud, but kind of working for us. Let's go -16. So kind of working there. We just need to get some other metal jimmying sounds to mess with. Let's try the same clip here. Yep, little things like this. Just like that should work pretty good. So right here, we'll kind of blend these together. Something right here, maybe. Now I'm going to try to actually slow this clip down. I'm going to drag this out. I'm going to use that time compression effect again. And we're going to try to get just this little section of audio here to fill out this entire area. So we're going to go ahead and make this longer because we want to make the time compression last longer. So at the moment it says it is 16.182. So we're going to go ahead and let's say triple it. Something like that. A little bit too much. Let's listen to that and see how it sounds. Okay, not too bad. So we're kind of hearing a little bit of metal mixed in with things I like. I also want to try some other metal sounds too. So what else do we have in here? That's pretty good back there. And that's pretty good right there. Little metal jamming sounds. So we're going to cut this in as well. Let's bring it into maybe one of these tracks up here for now. Something like this. And we're going to do the same thing with the time compression. We're going to make this a little bit longer. So let's just expand this a little bit. Bring this back. And we'll go ahead and let's just say double it for now. Not too bad. We're going to lower this. Let's go -40. And we're getting the general idea across now. So it's actually kind of working a little bit better. So we have the car door opening. We have some metal sounds. We need to hear the car lock right there. Let's see if we have some lock noises. There's some good stuff in here. So this little locking click noise right there, that might work perfectly. Let's just drag it in right here. Not too bad. Okay, let's go -12. Maybe a little bit too much, -6. Great. So look, it's not the most perfect car lock sound, but it is a lock sound, and it's going to go a long way towards selling this scene. If you're going to be the last stop before the edit gets locked and finalized, you'd probably want to spend a bit more time finding the perfect sounds. On the other hand, if you've got a sound team to take a pass at polishing everything up, you can get away with a little less perfectionism. That said, I decided to spend a bit more time off camera polishing this up, mostly because I really enjoy working with Foley, and because I charge Chris hourly. Let me just point out a few of the things that I did. First, I played around with the timing of the footsteps a bit more and tried to get it as synced up and realistic as possible with the on-screen action. Next, I decided to adjust the levels of the electrical hum based on how close Alex is to the street lamps. In the shot where he's breaking into the car, he's positioned right below the light, so the hum should be louder. So when he's far from the light, I set the levels to negative 24 dB, and when he's right under it, I increased it up to negative 18 dB. That's a 6 dB increase. Next, I added a little cloth grab sound near the beginning of the bag toss. I added 2 additional cloth rustles to simulate Alex's clothing rubbing as he slides into the seat of the car. And finally, I just cut off the cricket sounds with a hard edit, right on the frame where we cut to the car driving off. Alright, so now when we go back and watch the scene, we'll hear that there is a life of sound going on throughout this whole piece, and everything feels quite a bit more realistic. Let's have a look.
Hey guys, Chris here. So this lesson is going to have some homework. First, cut in your Foley, which is props, footsteps, and cloth. Then layer in your backgrounds to create the atmosphere of the world shown in this scene. And finally, tweak your levels and your timing on everything to make the effect as realistic as possible. Coming up in the next lesson, we're going to dive into another 2-part lesson all about cutting with style and imagination. In part 1, we'll be focusing on creative ways to edit the picture. All right, we'll see you in a bit.